I'm Glenn, City Valley Fishing Field Team, COAF Field Team on YouTube. And, well, Happy New Year. It's 2021, January 1. Oh, a little bit late today, about 11 o'clock, 11 p.m. in the evening. And while we just want to do a recap of some of the things that we did in 2020, and maybe we'll be able to give us some ideas and what's going to come up in 2021. So let me go and slide over and get some media here, and let's talk about some of the things that we did this past year. Okay, so let's start off with some of the things that we started off at the beginning of last year, 2020, and some of the fishing questions and answers that had come up. And, well, some of the things that we did to answer the mail was, in this case, this is one where yours truly was talking about some specific fishing opportunities in the area. And all it did was really talk about the upcoming TRWD Fly Fest, which unfortunately was canceled last year, but they still stocked the Trinity River, and we were able to get a chance to catch a fish or two there last year. So anyways, I believe it's coming up again this year, and hopefully it's not canceled and it stays on track. So that was one of the things that we did to answer the mail. Let's see, and there's another one that came up, and it was related to don't cut your fly line, please. And what this was, we were just answering a question concerning some of the ways we connected our fly line to the tippet, to the leader, to the tippet. And what we were describing here is just some suggestions, be it the nail knot variant that yours truly uses, where you pretty much cut a piece of line and you tie in a heavier, stiff monofilament line to the fly line and make a loop out of it using a perfection loop and a nail knot. So that was one of the things that we used to answer the questions that would come up. Next one up that came up last year was trout fishing spinning gear demo. So another question came up concerning trout fishing strategy 1, 2, 3, we call it. And this is a case of how would we approach fishing for trout using spinning gear. And in here we just described some specifics about how we would work the pond, how we would first look at what's available out there, and it turned out to be a good video. I think this is one where I fished, it was one of the smaller ponds over there in Dallas, and was able to give a good demo there. Let's see, the next thing that came up was related again to being able to do some trout fishing, and specifically fly fishing without a fly rod. And here gave two tips. One is the bubble fly rig, where you're using various bubble flies, be it the there's like 3 described here: the tough bubble, the torpedo bubble, and the adjustable bubble. And yours truly likes using the adjustable bubble. And then also describing the spoon and fly rig, where you take the opportunity to fish for trout in a pond, but you need to cast a little bit further out into the pond, and they're not actually working the surface. So you use a spoon modified with a trailing fly, and that seemed to work. In fact, we heard some folks doing some really good things, catching a few fish that way. Let's see, next up, had a question concerning fishing Denison Dam and how we decide how to go there and fish the particular river in this case. And what I described here in I call it the Cliff Notes version. You have a longer version of how to read the water and hydroelectric schedule out of Denison Dam. So we posted this one earlier in the year as well. And that one seemed to work pretty good. You got some good views there. And then later on, we kept getting some questions and discovering some tips. Specifically in this case, we found out that we could use Carmex in our fly vests for a dry fly floatant. So that worked out pretty good as well. It just happened to be that I didn't have any dry fly floatant, but I did have some Carmex in my fly vest, and guess what? That worked out pretty good, and I've been keeping it there pretty much lately as a ready-to-go item for fishing. Let's see, the next thing is also learn that taking a rubber, or not a rubber, but a near deer or a near deer like pattern and adding rubber legs to it was making a difference while we were out there fishing various ponds last year. So we've carried it over or hopefully carry it over into 2021 when it comes to catching a trout or two. That was a good one to keep in mind. Let's see, next one up was some fishing gear that I bought. In this case, this is, let's see, I can make it bigger. This is the Hydros SL1 fly reel, and I initially put it on the Cabela's CGR fly rod, little fiberglass one, and I've since moved it over to, I call it a, let's see, right here, I call it a discount one-handed spay combo. So I've got the Max Catch 10-foot Euro nymphing rod, and I put the SL1 on that rod and added a OPST Skagit head, I think, or the Rio Trout Max, and it's been making a fairly lightweight but really good discount switch rod for yours truly. Let's see. Next thing that came up was, oh, by the way, I had a chance to get the Tenkara USA Iwana. I got a Tenkara rod at a 30% discount, so took advantage of that, and that was pretty good in 2020. And in fact, I got that one still over here in one of the racks, and that one's been another one that I really like using when I'm doing some pan fishing, pond fishing, or creek fishing. Let's see, what else? The other thing that I did was I took the M rod. I have two of them. One's a fly rod version, and the other one is a kayak fishing spinning version. And I flip-flopped the metal portion of it, which is the rod portion, to the different handles, and I came up with this M-Rod Senko fishing rod. And that one was another good one that came out last year. In fact, I used it several times to catch a bass or two in the different ponds. And next thing from fishing rod standpoint, spin casting revisited. So yours truly had the opportunity to get for free, I think it was like 5 or 6 of these spin casting rods, specifically Shakespeare microcast as well as the Zebco Authentic 11 micro reel. That was a pretty good one, and been using those ever since, just basically tying on different flies or different lures, bubble rigs and whatnot, and being able to just switch rods and lures and be able to just try different things, trying to catch a trout or two or a fish or two at these different ponds. So that was a good one to luck into. Let's see. Then after that, sometime I think last year, saw that I could take the practice casting, I think it was the Reddington and then later the Orvis Practicaster, and was just kind of getting these just to practice my fly casting ability, or at least get it better. And what I found out was, well, guess what? You can convert it into a micro fly rod. So using some zip ties, I was able to get the Orvis Practicaster, and I put on a little Echo 2-3 weight and was playing around with that one as a micro fly rod, fly fishing rod at these different ponds and whatnot. So that was pretty good. Let's see what else in 2020. Let's see what was up. Oh, here's some more. So expanding on that micro fly rod concept, someone asked, "Hey, can you show us what other rods you have when it comes to micro fly rods?" So did a demo on, let's see, it's a telescoping micro fly rod that can collapse to a small, I think like maybe less than a foot long, keep it in my backpack. There's a wine cork fly rod that I made, as well as those Orvis, as well as Reddington practice fly rods that I just zip tied some fly rods or fly reels to, and that one turned out to be a pretty fun one to take out for some fishing ponds and whatnot. Let's see, next item. Let's see, you should try bait finesse. Yeah, I think you mentioned that, trying that, and it does sound fun. Still just playing around, hitting the different ponds and whatnot with the gear that I have, and maybe eventually I'll give that a shot as well. All right, so next thing was I lost my Waterwolf Go or Waterwolf underwater camera the year before, and I finally replaced it with a GoFish camera. But before that, I was tinkering with the GoPro, trying these different rigs and getting some good underwater shots, but not as good as what I was getting with that water wolf. So that's what part of the year, at least the beginning of the year, started. And then later on, playing around with it some more, ended up getting the GoFish camera. And after a little tinkering with the rigging and whatnot, been able to get some pretty good underwater video shots that lately I've been using to hit the different ponds, specifically for trout. See if I can get some underwater action shots there. So that was the next thing that happened in 2020. Let's see, next up after that, there was a question that came up, and I reached out to Texas Parks and Wildlife, and it was about a question about shad. Okay, so I wasn't sure if you could catch shad and move it to another lake and whatnot. So I got the answer straight from Texas Parks and Wildlife, and basically it's you have to remove all the water out of the container that you're going to put your shad that you catch at one lake, and then if you go to another lake, you have to not have any of that water there. And in this case, what I was doing was just freezing them, and I was able to use them elsewhere. So that was a good one to kind of roll right into from the spring into the summer fishing seasons. So let's see. Next up after that, started hitting Denison Dam, and a question came up about the fishing rig I was using. So here you go. And this, in fact, this is my favorite one to use, and it's basically the launcher float and a lead torpedo weight and a snap swivel, and basically I could flip-flop between the two and shift from fishing the upper water column to the lower part, basically by just undoing that clip. And I think I've seen some folks when I was out at Denison several times over the season where I think I saw some folks using that rig. So I think the word's getting out, and it is a very useful rig. Let's see. So going into that and knowing that I could get shad, there was a cast net I have, and it broke for whatever reason. So I just went and decided to just go and basically redo the braille lines. And so I put a video together on how I did that. And that one turned out to be pretty good because guess what? I was able to catch a few more shad than normal, than what I was losing because of the messed up braille line and kind of, well, they were getting through the not closing up on the net as good as it should have. But when I fixed it with that braille line, it worked out really good. Let's see. This one I got from, I posted previously using the shower clips and a tennis ball and some line to keep a stringer while I'm kayak fishing. And what happens is I'm able to put the fish over into the kayak, and if it comes loose, it'll drop back into the kayak. And all I did was just have to clip on the shower clip to the fish. Well, someone suggested use these big safety pins, like those laundry pins that you use, and they work much better because, one, they're stronger, and they also are sharper, so they're able to penetrate the fish much better. So really like that tip. So shout out to the individual who gave us that tip. We're still using that today. In fact, I've got a whole bunch of those safety pins still on the over there by the kayak in the garage right now. So this upcoming season, come kayak fishing time, definitely be seeing me out there with that stringer as well. Okay, so next up is the wooden trout net. It was a do-over. So I made this wooden trout net using some fairly cheap wood over there at Home Depot, and got it all rigged up, and everything was really good except the plastic or rubber laced net wasn't working good. So I just splurged and ended up buying one and zip tied it to the net, and after that I had no more problems with trout falling out of the net or jumping out of the net. Because what was happening is when I used the plastic lacing, it was too stiff, or I'd have to keep busting it open, and by then the trout would jump out. So using this rubber netting really helped. Okay, and then next is, about mid-year, decided to finally put a skeg on the Pelican Catch 100. that yours truly significant other uses. And adding that skeg, I didn't want to use this marine glue, and I ended up using a Velcro fastener with some basically removable semi-permanent glue. And now I can take that skeg on and off as I want, and basically it tracks much straighter now. So shout out to the individual who suggested using that skeg. I really like that. Next up, do-it-yourself jug line. So made some modifications to the jug lines that I've been using. In this case, took the little weight that was there because we were flagging jug lines and they weren't working as well. So made this modification, made much for a fishing buddy, and we posted a video on that. One takeaway from there is most recently in the Texas regs is there are some specifics on the diameter and the length of the jug line. So do make sure you check on that and those regulations just to stay up to date in case you decide to do some jug lines. You got to make sure you have the light. I think it's like 2-inch minimum diameter, and I think it's like a 10-inch. Well, go check the regulations. You'll see it in there. Make sure you're in the regs so you don't get a ticket. Let's see. Next up, we started a series called the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing Fishing Tips series on our podcast. We got a partner podcast, ifishnews.com, and it's basically yours truly hosting a podcast related to fishing in general. And in particular, we started a series specifically for fly fishing that's going into specific tips that are suggested in the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. And so we went through there, and of some of the things that we saw, one thing that caught our eye was one tip that talked about 40 feet in 4 seconds. And definitely it's a tough, challenging, but it's actually very good because it's more practical. And what it calls for is having the 40 feet of line with your fly in hand and being able to, in 4 seconds, get it to the target that you're casting to. And believe me, it's very challenging, but when you actually are out in the field, it becomes pretty nice when it comes to casting to a passing fish, or let's say a boil or whatnot. You see a fish there, you're able to get there because you have the confidence to be able to know that you can cast 40 feet in 4 seconds to the target that you're trying to fish to. So that starting that podcast has been pretty fun. I think we're doing it about every week or 2 weeks. Right now, that series is talking specifically on the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing and just going through those chapters and tips. Eventually, once we get done with that, we'll probably shift up to some other fishing-related things. But do check that out, and we'll continue that in 2021. Okay, let's see, what was up? Okay, here's another one. Still talking about the tips that are coming out of that Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. And in this case, this is fly casting, pointing and your thumb. And these two tips we thought were really good, specifically the pointing piece, where wherever your fly rod tip points is where your line's going to go. So that was a good tip. And then the other one was your thumb. And what it's talking about is keeping the thumb in the peripheral vision so that you know you don't go too far back on your back cast. And so that was another good one that I liked. Okay, so more on the iFish News podcast. Do check that out. So later in 2020, as the year progresses, you go from the winter trout stocking season into basically fishing the local ponds. Too cold to be out in the lakes because it's kind of chilly still. But you still have the opportunity to maybe fish the ponds. In this case, using some Senkos. And so we started doing some bass fishing with Senkos, specifically with that M rod initially, where I made that modification. And what that turned out to follow was talking about a tip related to making your Senkos last longer. And that's where I use super glue, as well as flipping the Senko over and using the other side when I'm threading the hook onto the Senko. So keep that in your back pocket. That was another video that we posted out there, and that's another one that we'll definitely use into 2021. Let's see. Next up, still talking pond fishing. So I mentioned earlier that we use this discount fly rod or switch rod, and again, the spring, still chilly time, still able to hit a few ponds here and there, do some pond fishing before we actually start going back to the lake and do some kayak fishing. So about the February, March, April time frame, I'm mainly fishing the local ponds and whatnot, and then I'll start shifting over to the lake once it gets warmer. All right, so that was fun in 2020, and we kept on doing the pond fishing, and here's some more stuff where I'm hitting different ponds with that discount switch rod. I think this is a case where we're also using it to fish for some of the trout that were stocked in some new locations that had been stocked previously for trout. And then, let's see, and then right into the full force of the spawn, I started fishing the different ponds, mainly for some of the bass. And here's one where I caught it using the fly rod. And that was, again, we're transitioning, this is in 2020, we're transitioning from trout stocking season, but it's still not time for us to go hit the local lake with our kayaks yet. So we bide our time and wet a line by hitting these different ponds. And of course, it's a spawn, so you're definitely going to fish in that, or you should give it a try. So that was one where I caught a bass there. Here's another one where I caught another bass. Well, nice bass again, another pond. Again during the spawn. And then, let's see, here's one that I was fishing one of the local ponds, and as I was fishing for one bass, out of the water, this one jumps. A pretty nice size one, and it jumped and it was going for a dragonfly. Saw a bunch of these dragonfly just right over the surface of the pond, and next thing you know, I see this thing jump up, and well, I just happened to get it on video. All right, let's see. Still talking ponds, but now, because I mentioned we got that I got a Tenkara rod from Tenkara USA. Well, it was fun using that Tenkara rod. It was one that I would keep in my back pocket, basically, if we were able to maybe be out and about, and maybe I had it in my backpack. I would just be able to do some fishing over there with that little Tenkara rod, and definitely can handle a bass or two. So that was, again, I'd say January, or more like March, April time frame. Still not going to the lake yet, but I soon will be. In fact, talking about that iFish News fishing podcast, before we started that fly fishing, Little Red Book of Fly Fishing series, one of the podcasts I posted was related to fly fishing from a kayak. And this is one of the trips that I took to Lake Lavon, our local lake just down the road from us. And right here, ended up catching a fair amount of bass, white bass that is, over there at, I think it was the treatment power, not power, but water treatment plant. And that was a fun trip, to the point that I believe I ended up putting some tips on how to fish that using a fly rod. But that said, full force into fishing the local lake. We went into some jug line fishing. So here is a mess of catfish that yours truly caught, jug lining. So now we're talking 2020, May, June, July, summertime coming up. Real fun time to be out there, especially jug lining. And now that we know that we can use our fixed braille, or fix the brails on our cast net, able to do some good fishing there as well. Using some of the bait, because big thing that I recall is shad. You got to have shad, especially when you're out there fishing for those catfish. That seem to be the go-to bait. Have used hot dogs, have used those little prepared stink baits and whatnot, and you tend to get more channel versus blues when you use those. If you get with shad, you'll get more blue catfish, and I tend to like blue catfish. Let's see. So still talking about kayak fishing. Here is a trip where I took the M rod with me, and this is where I used the smaller rod and just kind of threw it out there and did a bunch of trolling, and just wanted to see if it worked. And yes, it does, and it's a very handy rod. I do suggest that you make sure you have the lanyard attached, because this one doesn't float, not like those Zebco slingshot spinning rod reel setups that we use. Those tend to be pretty good to use, because if they fall into the water, they still float. Let's see. Next up, Here's another kayak fishing trip that we took. And this was where I'm doing the back paddling technique. And what happens there is I went to a particular place to fish. I think this was Little Ridge, the south ramp, the one that's free on Lavon. I did some back paddling. So you cast out your rod, you let it hit you let your slab and jig rig hit the bottom, and then you just start back paddling with your kayak. And as you're doing that, you're going to watch for your rod tip kind of do this jiggly move, a little twitchy move as it's kind of bouncing, and then you'll see them strike. And we've got some underwater video before of how these fish will be just tagging on the line or on the rig, and you know they're hitting it, and eventually they're going to hook onto it, and you'll definitely see that bend in your rod when they get there. So we did a lot of that last year. 2021 we'll probably do some more of it, so do stay tuned for some more of those videos. All right, speaking of kayak fishing, we did get our personal best jug lining, a blue cat from a kayak. This one went, I believe it went about 30 inches, and this one I ended up having to take the kayak back to shore and land it there. And that's a pretty good video to check out. It was kind of a windy day, but it was still a really fun time to go out there. And if I had a net, I probably could have landed it without having to take it to shore, but because, well, it was windy and didn't have a net, I decided to just take it back to the boat ramp and land it from there. Okay, let's see, what else is here? Okay, so later in the summer, ended up going to the Guadalupe, did some kayaking down there, and that was a fun time. A lot of folks on the river, a lot of fun on the river, and oh, by the way, even caught a fish or two while we went down there. So that was a pretty fun trip. And while we were there, ended up hitting, it's Comal River, fishing at Landa Park. Initially was trying to fish this waterfall area, but unfortunately it was closed because of COVID. But luckily I was able to go a little bit further down the road to Landa Park, and I got a few bass here. Unfortunately, it doesn't do justice in that I caught that one bass, but there were some really nice sized bass. They just didn't want to take my fly. So maybe it was just, well, it's good to see that they were there. It's good to know that they're there, but very frustrating when they're really, when you can see them right there. But I did get that one. All right, so that was a road trip that we took. Another road trip that we took last year was making the trip up to Beavers Bend State Park, fishing the little or Lower Mountain Fork. And some of the things that we noticed, some changes in the rules. It's barbless hooks, and it's fly fishing in some places, or no bait. And then you have to pay for parking now, so make sure you pay for parking. What we ended up doing was went up to where you check in to rent a cabin. They've got a little machine there where you can, it only takes exact change, so we use our credit card to pay for, I think it was like $10 for the whole day, but you can park anywhere. So that was a new one for me, as well as that new catch and release rules, as well as new sections. There's not a blue and red zone now, it's a 1 and 2 zone, and well, check out the regs. They're different than they were 2-3 years ago, so keep that in mind if you're going to hit Beavers Bend, Lower Mountain Fork over there in Oklahoma. Let's see, and then of course there's the Blue River, and in fact that's the go-to place right now to be going to if you're gonna want to catch some nice sized fish. Here's yours truly. Ended up getting this, I think this one about 18-19 inches. Nice looking trout in the catch and release section at the Blue River in Oklahoma. And I believe they're still stocking it every week. They're going to stock it. They're going to stock it all the way till March. Let's see, that last month the catch and release section is going to open up to put and take because those fish won't make it into the summer. So if you want to try catching some really nice sized trout, definitely hit there. Hit the Blue River. And if you want to try getting some of those bruisers that are up in the catch and release section once they make it put and take, just keep your eye out for maybe on the Facebook page for the Blue River, and keep an eye out for them saying that they've opened up the catch and release to put and take, because there's seeing some nice catches there. All right. Let's see, what else? Oh, by the way, Denison Dam. That was another place that we were hitting. Um, one more recently. This is kind of when it was colder, winter time. Here's some 8 lessons learned fishing Denison Dam on the Oklahoma wall. Doing some pretty good uh, uh, catching some stripers there. They're not the biggest ones, but still pretty fun. But did also learn a few things. That you need to make sure that you have in hand your Oklahoma license. And oh, by the way, you can't share stringers. You'll have to have your own stringer and your customer ID, or basically your Oklahoma license and name, on a tag that goes onto your stringer. So similar to what you do for trout fishing in Oklahoma, now you have to do the same thing for striped bass in Oklahoma. So keep that in your back pocket. Make sure you follow those regs. Okay. All right. So still talking of Denison Dam. Here's when they were still generating off and on throughout the day. And this was a great trip. Striped bass fishing fun at Denison Dam. Learned lots this round. Well, I went over there with my 6-weight switch rod and caught a lot of stripers. Take a look at that video. It's maybe we'll put a bunch of these links. I'll put a bunch of the links to the videos in the description here. But keep that one in your back pocket, because once they do start generating again, there's probably going to be a good opportunity to get out there with your fly rod, or just basically some not ultralight, but spinning gear, and get a chance to hit some of those bruisers out there. So that was 2020. Well, liking it, so probably do that again in 2021. Let's see. Okay, so where we're at right now, we're in the winter trout stocking season, and well, trying some different places to go to. In this case, went to Glen Rose, Texas. And what was interesting there is, yes, there's some trout there. They were kind of small, but what was also cool was it's a nice place to just maybe do a little day trip and kind of do some like window shopping or check out some of the areas there, because it looked like it had a cool downtown. Plus, found a place that had some good margaritas as well, some good Tex-Mex food there. So, well, if you're not going to catch a trout, well, you might as well catch or have a margarita or two. Okay, anyways, so going back to the current season, right now, winter trout stocking season, really been going out there with that GoFish camera, trying to get some of those underwater video shots and trying to see, well, just see what the trout are doing. In this case, so far we've been able to hit Waterloo, we've been able to hit Pottsboro. I think we've hit Pottsboro twice now, and got some good underwater video, at least, of some the trout basically going for some of these baits that we're sending out there when we're fishing. And one of the kind of things that we've learned is, at least so far, what we've noticed is when we're fishing those power bait power worms, we're noticing a slow retrieve or some movement in that in your line to get that power bait moving or that power worm moving. Seems to get more strikes that way. So do keep that in your back pocket if you decide to maybe hit some of the trout stockings here in the area. Okay, so that, I believe, is all we have for this round when it comes to a recap of 2020. And guess what? We'll probably do a lot of this again in 2021, and hopefully y'all can join us and maybe see some of the more of these videos that we'll be posting throughout the year. On top of that, keep in your back pocket for those that want to fish the, especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you got several more stockings that are going to be coming up. One in particular is Flower Mound, Heritage Park. I think it's only been stocked about 3 seasons now. This is maybe the third or fourth season. Small pond over there in Flower Mound, Capel. I think it's Flower Mound. Look up Heritage Park. It's a small pond. I think we got some videos of that location, and it's pretty small pond, but oh, by the way, it's a pretty fun place to try catching a fish or two when it comes to those trout. Okay, so that is all for now for 2020 recap. Hopefully we can do this again in 2021 and give you another summary and recap there. And that said, till next time, good luck, good fishing.